We're going to finish up the last couple of slides with Lindsay. I apologize. I know that people probably aren't on here that I need to apologize to, but we're trying to get information out. If you work with people that weren't able to get onto this broadcast, we are going to do this again at 2 p.m. to try to accommodate the people that we weren't able to have on this call because we were over the number of people that we're allowed to have on the webinar. So, Lindsay, take it away.
Great, thanks. So in kind of wrapping up, we want to highlight what we like to call the 4 C's of documentation. We have to keep this as fun as we possibly can. So these 4 words really sum up many of the components that we've talked about and typically apply across all funding sources. The first is be consistent. If we can say document one more time in this presentation, we will. So document, 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 and set aside time for documentation. I know several organizations that set aside 30 minutes or an hour each morning and each afternoon. So you start the day with any documentation that you weren't able to complete the day before, and then you end the day with documentation. Therefore, you have a consistent time every single day that you're doing documentation so it doesn't pile up and become really overwhelming. An agency should also allow for internal audits regularly to ensure that the files are up to date and in order. So you have someone within your organization to do an audit ever so often of your files to ensure that the materials that are needed are in the files, and if not, what can you do to correct that? The second C is be current. Update files regularly. The longer you wait, the more things will pile up and the more overwhelming it will seem. That's a service to you and your time, but also to your client. The third is be complete. If it's not in the file, it didn't happen. Make sure that everything is dated and signed. And the fourth is confidentiality and respecting that. Always, always obtain releases and ensure that they are in the file and can be easily located. Lots of agencies that I've worked with over the years have that release of information in the very top part of the file that they can access really easily, can share whenever they have referrals, so on and so forth. So ensure that with your files that they are kept confidential, that you have them stored in an appropriate place within your agency, and so on and so forth. So in wrapping up, we're going to turn it over to questions in just a moment, but I want to highlight that this is part of a training series and that we're going to hold in-person trainings throughout the state in May and in the beginning of June. And those trainings will be about 2.5 hours, and it will really be hands-on activities. So what does a case note look like? What things should be included in a case note? What should be included in a service plan? How do you document long-term and short-term goals? What are some examples of client case file checklists? What things do you have within your organization that's working or not working so you can have communication with other case managers across different organizations? We're also going to hold an additional webinar regarding completing the Supportive Housing Quarterly Report. We know that those are going to, the quarterly report is going to be due in July, I believe, and so we're going to be holding a webinar on June the 22nd to talk about, walk through the quarterly report and identify things that you should include and highlight and answer any questions that you may have on that. We have included our contact information if you have any questions about documentation. And at this point, Lori, we'll turn it over and address any questions that we may have.
Yes, we have a couple more comments from Mary Sue Cox of the Department of Human Services, Bureau of Homeless Services and Supportive Housing.
Just a quick mention, many providers out there subcontract with other agencies or entities for services such as mental health services, substance abuse, etc. The agencies that we contract with are responsible for documenting and reporting those services. So if you are Agency A and you subcontract with Agency X for mental health services, you're responsible for obtaining the data from Agency X, the subcontractor and reporting those to us in the appropriate client file for whoever is being served, as well as on the quarterly reports. That way it's reflecting those funds that are being expended for the subcontracted services. We're seeing more and more of this with a lot of folks for specific and some clinical services. So I just wanted to make mention of that. I know you think I was born to annoy you, and I do a lot of times about this sort of thing, but we do look for that stuff, especially because we're very sensitive to those, as would an auditor be. So just keep that in mind if you subcontract with anyone outside of your agency.
Great. That's a good reminder. Thank you, Mary Sue. We have one question in the queue here that says, when it comes to trying to re-engage a client into services through phone calls and notes and et cetera, would every instance be listed as case management? If not, how would we count our efforts to engage a client in services? Every instance of you attempting to engage a person in service is a case management function. Every instance. So that means, you know, if you try to get them 100 times in a week, that's 100 case management. You're probably not doing it 100 times, but, you know, I know that there are people that we knew were in crisis that we were really trying to get to. You know, when I was involved in direct service, and, you know, we would be there, you know, 20, 30 times, trying at different times, you know, after work, early morning, just all different kinds, leaving notes, flipping things under the door, knocking on the door, leaving door knockers, going to people's jobs and just not harassing them, but just, you know, seeing if you could meet with them on their break, you know, just anything that you can do. And each one of those is a case management service. That's a good question.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, and just make sure you document accordingly. Yeah, you may have gone by the house to see the client and they weren't there. Yes, that is a case management service. Yeah, you didn't accomplish your home visit, so when you write the note, you just write it accordingly. Hey, made a visit, client was not there, will return or will attempt something else. So yeah, it is a case management service, but it didn't accomplish that home visit. So just make sure you document accordingly.
Next question, will the PowerPoint be available to download? Yes, it will. We are recording it as we speak, and as soon as we get done with the second presentation that hopefully people that weren't able to get on this one will be able to get onto, we will send the information out to everyone that's registered in a follow-up email so that you can see this and listen to it again and take notes. That's a good question. Next question, can you define each of the services? We can, and so can you. If you go to the ilhomelessreport.org, you will, and go to forms. If you go down to the supportive housing forms, well, actually the manual's at the top. You click on the manual and go to the supportive housing section, which I believe starts on page 27 and goes through page 36, I think, if I'm right. There is the definition of each service right there for you to use at all times. You can print that off and have it. In fact, I recommend that all case managers have a copy of that so that when they are counting and filling out the forms that they're giving to the people who do the reports, they can properly document and count the service that is provided. One of the things that it's important to remember about IDHS is that you don't have to be paying for the service with IDHS funding to be able to count the service. As long as you're coordinating the service and referring people to it and ensuring that they're able to obtain it, you can count it. We count a lot of things in IDHS, much more than people do, I think. I think you all don't give yourself enough credit at all. Next question. What if we have someone who needs supportive housing services but eventually progresses to the point they no longer need services? Should we try to arrange to have them move out of permanent supportive housing program? Okay, I want you to listen very carefully to the answer of this question, and the answer is yes. This is not to say that there is any time limit whatsoever on permanent supportive housing or the permanent supportive housing program, but eventually sometimes there are folks that are able to progress to a point where they are doing well, have been able to resume work, have been able to be in recovery for a long time, who are to the place where they don't want to be engaged in services any longer. And it is very appropriate and countable case management services to assist a person to move on into housing in the community, whether that's other affordable housing that you help them sign up for, or whether that's fair market housing, or whether somebody buys a house, whatever it is, that is perfectly acceptable service. That's actually service that you can count. That's case management service. But this is not to imply at all that there is somebody saying we've got to move everybody out by X date. No. The permanent supportive housing is permanent, which means it can be forever. And there are people that we know that we serve that need to be in supportive housing forever. And that is fine. That's what the program is designed for. But if you have people that are able to get back on track and have been stable for some time, it is perfectly acceptable to assist them to move into the community.
Or kind of shift their service plan with providing some other type of services. Maybe now they're stable in their housing, stable with recovery. Now maybe they want to work on savings or bank account or some going back to school or you know, something to that effect. So now you just kind of help shift the services that they do need, because they still, as long as they're in the program and you haven't graduated them yet or moved them on to other type of housing, you still must provide some type of services for them. So then it's an opportunity for both of you all to just kind of shift what services you're providing.
Good point, Aaron. That is all the questions that I have submitted at this point. So I think that we are going to say thank you very much for participating. You guys are the lucky 100 that was able to get onto the broadcast, and so it goes to show you that being early is good for something, right? And we will be sending out the link to the recorded version of this. We'll also be sending out the information about the upcoming in-person training, and also information about the upcoming next webinar, which will be on Wednesday, June 22nd at 1:30 p.m., where we will walk through the quarterly report, each question, and tell you how you determine the answer to that question, what you need to be reporting on in your quarterly report. All right, I want to thank Brenda Hanbury and Mary Sue Cox from the Bureau of Homeless Services and Supportive Housing, Lindsay Bishop from CSH, and Aaron Eldridge from SHPA for participating and helping us lead this webinar. And thank you very much for being participators. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.